Ask the Podcast Coach for October 15th, 2022.
Let's get ready to podcast.
There it is. It's that music that means, hey, it's Saturday morning. It's time for Ask the Podcast Coach, where you get your podcast questions answered live. I'm Dave Jackson from theschoolofpodcasting.com, and on today's show, we're going to talk about show notes. What are they? Conversations versus podcasting. We have a fun segment of What's in the Box, and some mystery gear will be showing up, and the person that's going to help me trudge through those is the one and only Jim Cullison from Home Gadget Geeks. Find him at theaverageguy.tv and find him right there. Jim, how's it going, buddy?
Greetings, Dave. Happy Saturday morning to you. That's quite an intro. Thank you for changing that up a bit. You're a little hot for me this morning.
All right.
Volume-wise, maybe with the things we have going on, but looking forward to this Saturday morning. Thanks for having me back.
Yeah, always fun to do that. Are you thirsty?
It could just be me too, but I am thirsty, yes.
You are thirsty? Okay, excellent.
Yeah,
Here we go. We'll do the awesome Ask the Podcast Coach coffee pour. That, of course, is brought to you by Mark over at podcastbranding.co. If you are in need of podcast art, if you're in need of maybe a lead magnet or a whole new website, or at a member of the School of Podcasting that said, hey, I have a Divi site and it's kind of horked. You know, do you know anybody that can come in and fix it? And I said, absolutely, I do. That would be the one and only Mark from podcastbranding.co. Because the great thing about it is he is a podcaster and he's also an award-winning graphic artist. And it just so happens that if you are a person that's into Divi, which is a really popular kind of site builder, Mark really is a master of Divi. So if you want to look good, get some new artwork, get a new website, get a branding kind of audit, Mark does it all. It's over there at podcastbranding.co. He's been around for years, and he will take care of you with one-on-one service. Check him out, podcastbranding.co.
Big thanks to Dan Lefebvre over there, Based on a True Story podcast at basedonatruestorypodcast.com. And if you're looking for a podcast to listen to that brings Was It Real to the idea of the movie or television show that you're watching, Dan covers those. He does a super great job, Dan. Thanks for your sponsorship, for your mug sponsorship. I think we've been doing this for a while, man. This thing is a champ. It just holds up, keeps things cool, keeps things hot. Thanks, Dan.
And one of the things I saw on Facebook this morning, and of course, if you want to jump in, we're at askthepodcastcoach.com/live, and you can also go to askthepodcastcoach.com/join, and that will jump you right into the video. And somebody in Facebook said, like, show notes, metadata, like, what is that stuff, and what do I need? So, Jim, what do you do for show notes? What do you consider are good show notes?
Wow, this is a great question, because I think it depends for just about absolutely everybody. I know some folks who spend a lot of time doing show notes. At Gallup, we actually transcribe, make those part of the show notes. So a paragraph that kind of summarizes it, that's written content based on what it was about. It's unique. Robot doesn't write it. I have a person that actually writes that paragraph, right? We include some pull quotes, right? So 3 quotes from each of from the show somewhere. And again, I have somebody pick those. A robot doesn't pick those, but I have somebody pick those out. And then we do Otter transcriptions, and they're fixed by somebody, so they're perfect and they're done. That's what we do at work. At home, I write a paragraph. I use Otter's summary timing, like the one that you can't get. Sorry.
I haven't checked yet. I should be, in theory, right? Wasn't it going to come at the end of September or something like that? So
yeah, so I use the summary because I just don't get the people to read the show notes on Home Gadget Geeks like I do at Gallup. So just a summary with timestamps. I've got a plugin that helps. You can click on that and go right to that spot. So 2 different ways for 2 different platforms, just kind of depending. We've taken a lot of audience feedback on what they're looking for show notes, and then incorporated that in. So those are kind of the 2 different ways that I do it. What about you?
Yeah, first of all, when I hear metadata, I hear a lot of people that are actually talking about ID3 tags, which are inside the MP3 file, which do nothing, zero in terms of SEO for you. In fact, the only app I know right now that uses the ID3 tags inside the MP3 is Overcast, and it only uses the image. Everything else in app world is from your feed. And then the only time ID3 tags come into play is if somebody downloads the file to like their computer. But I'm with you. I used to put whatever I put on my website in my show notes. I don't do that anymore. I do a paragraph. I try to have a paragraph that explains what's in the show and how they're going to benefit if they listen. Because when I asked my audience, I go, what do you want? They said enough of a description to let me figure out if I'm going to listen to this or not. And then links. Boy, if you don't put links to, like, if we mention a book or whatever, or a guest in their website or whatever, if you make somebody Google after listening to your show, that is not a good experience, is basically what I got from my audience. So I usually do that. And then what I do, and of course I'm going to have my call to action. So whatever that is in my show notes and anything like that. Especially the School of Podcasting has multiple topics. So it's kind of weird, but usually I just put the basics there. Then I go to my website, and that's where I expand everything. In fact, I usually write a blog post to help me focus on what the heck am I trying to say. So I take that, add it out, because that's really, I want a ton of words there because I'm trying to attract Google. In the apps, I'm trying to attract my listener to hit play. And so that's what I do. And for me, it's just one of those, like, if I have somebody who put like a transcript in their feed and I'm looking for that link for the book and I got to go scroll. Oh, hold on, scroll, keep scrolling. Oh, here it is way down there at the bottom. Okay, finally, 10 minutes later, there it is. For me, transcripts are not a place to be. That's something that's going to the app. I'm like, that needs to go on your website. And even that, I had a client this week that did a transcript, and I think they did the thing where you kind of, they fixed it for human reading but they had no subheadings. And I was like, I'm like, subheadings.
Yeah, we include subheadings in ours for sure. Cause otherwise it just becomes a big, long, piece of, text basically. Right. So I think that's important that you get, by the way, we put them at the very end, but we do include them. I mean, they are there. Our listeners want to see them. They don't want another click to go find them. Like they just want to see them. They want to be able to go to the post, scroll to the bottom, see the show notes or see the transcripts. And because we put subheadings in there, I do feel like they are part of the post, right? It's not just, here's a dump of what we said, but we try to use our transcripts to help people navigate through the conversation. We do find people, this is going to sound weird, they don't want to listen to the show. They want to read the show notes. They want to read the transcript for whatever reason, right? It's not wrong. It's just what they want. They're faster readers, or they want to skim through it, or they want to do a Control F and find some things. So I'm actually a big advocate of keeping your transcripts in your show notes. I hear people say, SEO, blah, 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 blah. Okay, whatever. Our listeners want it. That's where they want to see them. That's where we're going to give them to them. Yeah.
Bottom line, what does your audience want, Yeah. For me, transcripts are, especially when people put them on their website. In other words, if I just take a basic Otter thing and throw it on my website, that's just like the lazy man's show notes. Because just because it's more words, it doesn't mean that Google's looking for good content. And when you put a straight transcript that's and I don't know about you, but when I see a straight transcript, because you can spot them, I like almost immediately eject. I'm just like, no. But if you lead with it,
right? If you lead with it, that's the problem you're seeing. Like if you're showing up and the first thing you're seeing is the transcript, that's when you eject. I think if you're clear about it in your show notes, like this is the transcript.
Yeah. But I've just seen people that like, they just go to Otter, copy, paste, and the thing you did is subheadings. That's to me, that's the one I'm like, okay, this is a transcript, but at least it's a transcript that appears to have been massaged, shall we say, to be readable.
Edited.
Yeah.
Edited. Right. Yeah. Or in some cases we still are word for word, but I think that we use H1 tags, and I'm going to get a little technical, and this is an area I don't know as much about, but I think we use H1.
It's time for a power rant.
Oh, wrong button. Oh. I'm not power ranting. It's.
And now,
there we go.
Oh, he's been waiting for this. It's time for Jim to get his nerd on.
I love the kids. I forgot about the kids.
I love what he says, and he's been waiting for this. I forget. So anyways, I forget. This is not going to be too technical, but we use a certain kind of header tag on the HTML so that calls out. And I think Google looks for those. That's another thing it looks for as it's going through so don't take my word for it. I have people who do that kind of stuff where I work and are way smarter than me.
That's a great point, because back in the early days of me doing websites, I would highlight text and make it bold and maybe make it bigger, which looked the same as if I had given it like an H2 or an H3, which is just a heading style. But Google knows that's a heading when it's in a heading whatever tag. And so it's better to apply a heading tag than to just make it bold and bigger, because you're missing potential Google juice. So,
well, and listen, don't do everything for Google. I mean, that's a struggle, because, you want to do, certainly you want it up there in the search rankings, right? But then if it's not meeting the needs of the people that you're doing the podcast for, right? That's a struggle. There's a balance in there. And so I think we look at visibility first. So laying on the page, what does it look like? Is it inviting? Will people actually make their way through it? Is it helpful? The pull quotes up front, or to just help people? They could also grab them and tweet them if they wanted to do it that way, right? There's one of those kinds of things. Gives them an idea what's in the program. So we kind of do the funnel approach, right? So we get very, very helpful up front as far as summarizing things. And then that summary kind of builds out and gets more and more specific and ends with the transcript, which is very specific. It's still got some helpful bits in there. One of the things, we have a custom built CMS. So we can't put links like, I have a WordPress plugin for Home Gadget Geeks, where if I just put what looks like a timestamp, it automatically points that right to that part in the audio. I wish we had that at work. That would be super great. I've asked to build it, and they're like, yeah, we'll do it in 2027. So it's like, oh, okay, well, that's obviously not going to get done. But I think that's a helpful bit, too, to be able to say, hey, I'm saying this here on this timestamp. In the transcript, they could click on it and go listen to it right in that spot if they wanted to. I think that's helpful as well.
I've been playing, it's funny, Podverse. I believe FM is an app I've been playing with, and they have a really cool clip feature, because what they do is they just take the original file, and somehow in their software, they're like, oh, the beginning of the clip plays here and the end of the clip plays here. And then you can see what other people have clipped of that episode, but it makes it super easy. I think easier than any app I've ever used to make clips and then share them. And then when people click on it, it goes to the Podverse website where you can see that clip along with the other clips that other people have done, which is kind of cool. Patrick says Elsie Escobar is a great example and resource for show notes. Yeah, if you go to the feed.libsyn.com, you can see there an example of here's what we talked about. I think she even put timestamps and then links to everything that they talk about. DR has a thing. I try to put links into books that were mentioned on a client's episode, but the client said they didn't want people to leave my website. That is a person that is not serving their audience. It's all about them. And I get that, hey, I got them on my website. This is what I want them to do. Maybe not. What's a good one? I would then put them in the show. I'd do the opposite then, I guess. First of all, I'd say to my client, is that really like, because what you do is you open it in a new window so that when they close the Amazon link, it's there in the background. But to me, I see that and I'm like, but it's, client's always right. Though. Yeah.
Well, it's a good thought. We say a lot of times, the reason we have live pages is so that folks come to our site, they consume it on our live page and maybe not on YouTube, right? You've done all this work to create all this great marketing for your site, and then you want that to be effective for them there. You don't want to send them other places. So I think there's a balance in there somewhere, like everything, there's kind of a balance. I get it, but it's pretty frustrating when, at least with our audience, it's pretty frustrating if somebody mentions a resource and then we don't link out to that resource. That's a little frustrating for them. I get feedback on that sometimes. They're like, hey, why didn't you include that link? It doesn't look like you're being very friendly.
Yeah. Well, and I think show notes are one of those things, like I've seen people that literally will do a sentence and a half. Like that's it. Like there's no There's no show notes police that are come by and go, I'm sorry, we're going to revoke your podcasting license. You didn't write enough show notes. Or this one, Fred says, I recommend both links as well as images. I don't do images in the thing that goes to the app. So in my media host, I'm not putting images. I'll put the image, for the episode, but this is where you can use that as a lead magnet and say, I remember I was coaching a travel podcast, and they had all these amazing pictures on their website. And I said, you need to mention that in your episode. Like, hey, I was on this sailboat in the sunset and I took a picture of it. And it was like, mention, hey, if you go to the website.com/whatever, you can see the sailboat. I said, because what that does is you get the people that want to go deeper into the story. Or if you're talking about, this awesome coffee maker, you got to see it. It's blah, blah. Okay. Links are in the show, go out to the website. For me, I try to keep anything that goes into the apps, I try to keep as simple as possible. I'm doing bold and bullets. That's it. Any other formatting from that, I don't want to poke the bear that might make things invalid. Not that an image would make it invalid, but I just keep it super simple for that. So,
you think I think there was a trend early on, maybe 10 years ago, to have images for, like, if you were talking about equipment or things like that, right, you'd put the image and make the image a link. I think that trend is, it feels like it's going away in some regards, or am I wrong on that?
I've actually never heard of that. When I look at that, I go, that's actually maybe a better idea. Click here to see the picture, and it just links to the JPEG or whatever it is. But I'd rather send it to my
the
website.
JPEG's got the link to whatever. Like we would in the technology podcast, we review a lot of equipment, and so on your page, you'd put the picture of it, and if you clicked on the picture, it would take you to that at Amazon or whatever. A lot of folks used it for affiliate marketing type things. But yeah. I feel like I'm seeing less, and maybe this is it, less graphics that aren't advertisements, if that makes sense. In other words, I add a graphic, that's just a graphic. But if it's an ad that I'm putting in there, you can definitely see the ad, right? That's in there. And so maybe ads have replaced those graphics. Like if people feel like if they're putting more graphics in their post, it's taking away from the ads. I don't know. I hadn't thought about that in a while, but it seems like I'm seeing less of those kinds of posts.
Yeah, I'll have to. I know there's somebody at Libsyn that just smashes everything into her show description. And the reason I remember is because, like one time she tried to put a table. And I was like, you got to remember, and where this usually happens is if you're using your media host, so be it Libsyn, Buzzsprout, Captivate, whoever, if you're using them for your main website, well, then you want all these images and stuff in there. And that's where I'm like, that's where it gets sticky, because you're like, all right, well, you can't put a table into an HTML RSS feed. That's not going to work. So it gets kind of tricky.
I think maybe the trend on that has been to go from pictures embedded, to take your text and embed it around pictures in your site to full screen pictures because of mobile, right? And thinking through that, you don't want that experience where text is flying all over the place. So I think in a lot of cases now it's full screen mobile. Yeah, it's full screen text.
So you might have text and then an image, and then more text instead of trying to wrap it around. Yeah, I can see that.
I think that's right.
Craig says, my wife has really bad hearing disability, and transcripts are important for folks like her, although they usually aren't well implemented in players. Yeah, and that's where people are talking about subheadings. We kind of hit that. That's a great way to break up, because here's the thing. People don't read. People do not read. When they go to a website, they skim, and it's those subheadings that then have them go, okay, I think I am going to read this. I know that's how I am. When I read that, I was like, no, and then I was like, yeah, that's kind of what you do, Dave. So it's tricky that way.
Go ahead.
Well, Dave says if you like to post transcripts, his preference is to send them in exchange for an email. Get those folks on a newsletter. So it's like, hey, here's the show notes. If you need a transcript, it's going to cost you an email address. So
we went that way on Home Gadget Geeks. So I stopped providing transcripts because just nobody was reading them. And I took them out. Nobody noticed. So I put transcripts available upon request. So if folks want, at Gallup, we definitely use those transcripts then to create an SRT, push that into YouTube and fix the YouTube transcripts. Probably every other show, my editor contacts me and says, what did you mean to say here? and so he'll send me the Otter, we'll jump into Otter together. And what I love about Otter is you can listen as it's, it does kind of the karaoke style where you push play and it'll play the audio while it's going through the transcripts. And I think a couple days ago, I was like, Mark's my editor. I was like, I have no idea what I said there. I don't know why I said that or what it was meaning. And he's like, okay, we'll just go word for word. I said, perfect. I don't think we're going to find anything, but that is a helpful tool then I think for us to take and move into YouTube. As he's doing the transcripts, if you're doing transcripts and you're not doing pull quotes, you're missing the boat. Like pulling as you're going through the transcripts, you're seeing all the words, you're seeing these great quotes. Just take time to write it down and say, this was a great quote. This was a great quote. Then at the end, pull those out and put them in places as pull quotes in your show notes. It's a huge miss because you've already done the time to get it done. Make sure you're getting those pull quotes. And then you can reuse those on Twitter or on wherever, Facebook, Instagram, wherever you want to do. Well, you can reuse those pull quotes. It's
great because Patrick says I'm doing a lot with more quotes these days. It's a great way to break up the transcript as well. And Gary, speaking of Twitter, says click to tweet, as in click the number 2 tweet.com. Great resource. It's free. You can use, there's a level you can pay for, but you can, do that. And so here's how this works. You go over and you type the tweet for your guest. So it's all set up. And then you click a button and it gives you a link. And if your guest is logged into Twitter, all they have to do literally is click that link. It types the tweet for them and all they have to do is click send. That's an amazing one. And then Coach Dave mentioned this a couple episodes ago. I craft my notes in textmetrics. I need to go deeper into that, adjust the SEO and build the notes for them to complement the show and vice versa. And when I looked at textmetrics, I was like, I need to come back and look at this later. And I never did, but it looks like a cool tool. I know Longtailrpo is an SEO suite that's been around forever, and they have a lifetime deal right now going on at AppSumo. I saw that come up and I was like, because I used to have it and then I didn't like decades ago, I used to use that and I was like, I might go over and I don't know about you. AppSumo was a dangerous place for me.
You've mentioned that before. Yeah. And so that makes me feel like you struggle with it from time to time there's some great apps and you get too many. If you buy too many at once, then you end up never coming back to some of them. Right.
Yeah. The, Coach Dave says the SEO step added to my workflow has really elevated the ranking on of his site. I don't like to obsess over SEO because boy, can you. There are people, that's their job. I'd rather obsess over communicating the message and connecting. That is exactly. And that's something I need to do more. I sniff SEO about 3 times a month. And I'm like, see, he's got it like every episode. I use a headline tool for a while that was helping me make better headlines. That was kind of cool. But even that, there are times when you're like, it's, the episode is about blank. I don't need more, emotional words and I need more. It's like, look, it's about blank. Let's just do that. So,
what do you think you spend, Dave, building the show notes for a show? If you were to guess, I know we don't time these things
for the app or the website. Both. Yeah.
Yeah.
My website, probably a half hour to 45 minutes. Cause there are times where I am, if it's like today, we're going to talk maybe about what's the difference between a conversation and a podcast. That's going to be a blog post first. Cause I know kind of that's a topic I want to talk about, but I right now still have things. I have a couple things in my head, but I need to flesh those out so that they really like, what are you trying to say here? Because otherwise it'll be just a tangent, all over the place. And people go, well, I think he's kind of trying to say this. I'm like, I really need to come up with a focus sentence. The difference between a conversation and a podcast is blank. And here are paragraphs to reinforce that statement. That's kind of how I work. So that's where in some cases, if I have a subject and I really want to, that just helps me, which is funny because I'm doing it now. As he's tried to say this sentence like 6 times, it helps me focus on what I'm trying to say. And so that's basically why I do a blog post. And then from there, again, I take maybe the first opening paragraph, put that into my media host, all my links, my calls to action, and there we go. So, but that can take me, depending on if a football game is on in the background, an hour, maybe 30 minutes. If I'm focused, I've got an app on my PC that if I turn it on, there's one where I think it's just called Lockdown, and it doesn't let me do anything. It's like no Facebook, no YouTube, no social media. Like I think I can open up Word and a couple other things. So, how about you? How long does it take you?
45 minutes.
Yeah.
For Home Gadget Geeks. We probably spend just on show notes, probably 4 or 5 hours a gallop on each show because of the transcripts.
Yeah.
Right. So, but the listeners a little bit bigger and the game. I mean, because we're doing this from a professional standpoint, the bar's set a little bit higher, and I can't get away with transcripts by request, and I can't get away with misspellings in my transcripts, and I can't get away. Right. That stuff needs to be. And so, I have a full-time editor that does those for us, which is pretty nice. It's a privilege for sure. Not a lot of podcasters have that. For me, it's a privilege.
Yeah. So DR says, so that whole thing about pictures on a website, is that considered a call to action? And if so, is that my one call to action for the episode? No. So if I said, there was this time when I was using a microphone and it was really pretty, it was cool, it was gold with, blah, blah, blah. If you want, I'll have a picture of that out in the show notes out at askthepodcastcoach.com/411. That's just a thing. And then, be sure to put it there. Like right now I have a text message going on behind me. It says Otter, textmetrics, click-to-tweet, Longtailrpo. Those are the things we've mentioned so far that I need to go get links for, because those are the links. So it's one of those things, as I'm listening and I'm editing, that's one of the things I'm listening to as well. So it's one of those things. It's tricky with show notes. And the other thing is, some people go, yeah, Dave, I don't have 45 minutes. Okay. Do what you can, and that's where I think it was comedian Jay Moore once had like 2 sentences. And I was like, maybe he was getting on a plane to go to a comedy gig or something like that. It really depends on, because Fred's saying, hey, images with links, that has been emphasized for key blog writers. Right. This is where I'm differentiating, though. I'm like, hey, my website is my blog. I'll put images and all the chocolatey goodness over there. But the stuff I put into Libsyn or Buzzsprout or Captivate that's going to go out to an app, I'm like, it's consider the source. This is the tech support guy that sees how that can mess up your feed if done improperly. And I'd rather also consider the source. What am I trying to do? I'm trying to get you to my website so you can sign up for my membership site. So my goal is to get you to my website. Now, if that's not your goal, throw as many images in there and just make sure they don't mess up your feed. So in the end, show notes are kind of tricky. They can be as long or as short as you want. I had somebody I saw on Facebook that said, if I do a solo show, do I have to use a script? And I was like, it's not like somebody's like, all of a sudden you have a knock on the door and a siren and, hey, I'm sorry. Again, the script police. I'm sorry, sir. You have to turn over your podcasting license. You've broken the rule. You've done a solo show without a script. No, if you can do a solo show without a script, do a solo show without a script. That's kind of the good news, bad news of all things podcasting, is you can kind of do whatever you want, which leads me, he said, hitting a marker. We'll leave the show notes conversation for a bit. Jim, what is the difference? Now, for the record, your answer may be used in the next episode of the School of Podcasting. What's the difference between a conversation and a podcast?
Well, I think one could be a subset of the other. So in other words, I think when we think about conversations, that's a little bit of a style. That's at least the way I use the word. Some people say, how do you podcast? And they say, we're a conversational style, right? We talk back and forth. We also say the word interview and that. So for me, I think of conversation, that's the style of what you're making in a podcast.
Okay. Because to me, and I'm still working on this, I now, the last couple conversations I've had, I've tried, as I'm in the conversation, try to step out and listen to the conversation. And I think one of the differences is a podcast is meant for public consumption. And consequently, you edit out the boring parts of the conversation. Because I have a friend of mine that we talk for long periods of time and we take all sorts of tangents. And there are times that I'm like, that was kind of, I love my sister to death, but her conversations that I have with her bore me to tears because she wants to talk about some guy that, the bass player of Hermits died. And I'm like, I don't know who that is and I don't care, but I'm sad that you're sad. So, I think that's, I'm just trying to figure out because so many people think like I get that you want a podcast to sound conversational, but I think there is a difference. And that's the part I haven't quite honed in on. Like, what is the difference between a podcast and a conversation?
Well, it's so hard to judge because I listen to some guys. I listen to this whiskey podcast called One Nation Under Whiskey. And it's these two guys and they have these conversations, but they're talking about the topic as they're doing it. And I find it very, very interesting. I don't know. I don't find everybody's conversations that interesting because oftentimes, like I'm invested in these two guys. I like these two guys. I'm interested in these two guys. So their conversation is interesting to me.
Right.
So does that make every conversation we have? If I just walked around at work and started having conversations with people and just recorded them, would that? Which, by the way, an NPR
intern
did
host?
that,
okay,
where they mic'd themselves up and all day they just recorded everything, hoping to get like those moments of good conversation. Right? Hey, it's one way. So it's a way to do it. So is all conversation interesting? Beauty is in the eye of the beholder. Like a conversation. Listen, you and I have a conversation here, right?
Right.
It's interesting to some. I don't think it's interesting to others, and they let us know when it's not interesting, right? So it kind of depends, doesn't it?
Yeah. Well, I listened to Mark Maron and Tom Segura for 20 minutes, and it dawned on me that, hey, I'm bored. And the reason was they were talking about old comedy clubs that don't exist anymore. Now, if I was a comedian, I'd probably be like, oh my gosh, I totally forgot about the Chuckle Hut in, Dearborn or whatever, But for me, I was like, why am I listening to this? I'm like, oh, because they're celebrities. Because otherwise I would have bailed a long time ago. So, yeah, it's just one of those things I haven't quite. This is one of those where I need to like turn off everything and really focus on what that is and that whole 9 yards. Should we play What's in the Box? Is it time to play What's in the Box? I need.
It is. Do we have music for that?
I think we can find some music for that. If nothing else, we'll use the old. Wait, come on, Roadcast. Because we love this music. This is always fun. So this came to me from, oh my God, I'm drawing a total blank. Darren Dake from the Corner podcast.
Do you know what's in it? Like
I have no idea what's in this. So it's,
you opened it, but you don't know.
I've opened it so I didn't have to go run with scissors. But it's about 5 inches by 4 inches. It's a square-ish box. So Darren, thank you so much. I have no idea what this is. I'm hoping it's not like a sexual toy or something like that. That would be embarrassing. I open up the big box, and of course we have a smaller box inside. And when I open it, it's a white box, and I open it up, and see this. The Jim would love this. It is a coffee mug.
Nice.
Thank you, Darren.
Done.
Oh, look at it. If they're breathing, we're leaving. Cornertalk.com.
Nice.
Very cool. Thank you, Darren.
I like it.
Yeah, because
Are you going to start drinking coffee on the show?
I might. I don't know.
Are you a coffee guy?
I am not a coffee guy. I have. I tried to remember when it was the coffee generation. Join the coffee generation, and I have to put so much stuff in my coffee that it's not coffee anymore. It's like chocolate milk, basically. Like if I go to Starbucks, I get a Frappuccino, the basically chocolate milk in a bottle kind of thing. So thank you for that. And that's the fun part is I had to deal with the post office to get that. I have a P.O. box. Here's something that most people don't know. If you have a newsletter, by law, you should have an address in your newsletter somewhere, an actual physical address. So I have a P.O. box, and I will spend money on microphones and things like that. Every year when I get I think it's like $100 and something It might even be closer to 2. It's not cheap. And I have a very small, like nothing fits in unless it's a letter, nothing fits in my P.O. box. Maybe a Christmas card. But every year when I have to pay my P.O. box, because I don't feel like putting my actual address in my newsletter, because you never know when you're going to go to the door and they're like, are you the guy that said on the podcast rodeo show my show was horrible? Yeah, Dave was killed by a upset podcast rodeo guy. So I have a P.O. box. So that's always kind of fun. But which leads us to our secret. It's time to play. It's fun games today. We had what's in the box. Now we're going to play which mic is Dave using. Oh, because
okay. So first of all, what mic were you on?
Well, right now I'm on the Shure SM7B, okay, which is on channel 1. Works much better if you turn the slider up.
Yeah, there you go.
These little things. So now I'm on the blue Sona microphone. Link in the show notes at askthepodcastcoach.com/411. And the fun thing is, if I were to switch here between the two, there's almost no difference. This is a little boomier for some reason. Maybe because I'm closer.
It's fuller. It's got a little full sound.
Yeah. So this is the SM7B. This is the blue / Logitech, whatever you want to call it, Sonya.
Yeah, you could both back of them. You could back both of them a ways from you because they're both a little close at this point. But
and so we are back to the SM7B at this point. But it's funny because it looks a lot like the SM7B. It's here. Let me go on the SM7B so I can show you I'm on both. Okay, so I'm on the SM7B. Good. So what's cool about this is it looks like the SM7B. Thank you. So here's that. So it's got a little, like this little wing thing that comes down and then it plugs in the back. And what's cool about that is the back of the SM7B has switches unless you put your plate on it, which I don't. And this has just a magnet that you can push on and pull it off. And there are your switches. So one is, if I go back to this, one's a bass cut and one is a presence boost. So it's really not that hard, Dave. So if we, so this is the Sona, and I'm going to now turn off. Oh,
push it a little bit away from you too. It's a little close. We're getting some
Here's the fun thing. I can't read it.
Oh, because of the light.
Because of the lighting in here.
Yeah, and you're old.
And I'm old.
Do you need to get your readers?
You know, the other thing is, when I put this microphone in, I'm like, why can I not read this? I could read it last night. I have the microphone in upside down. Yeah. So this should be on the other side. Because I was like, why can't I read that? Okay, so this is now with the bass off. This is a little bass roll off, and this is with I definitely heard the bass kick in there a little bit. And again, I am a little close to this.
You are.
And then this is goes the other way. This is that's a presence boost. So I hear many more S's and T's now with that. So here it is with it on.
Okay, not bad though.
Yeah, I actually like this a little more.
At the right distance.
Yeah, and then this is with it off. So it's like a little de-esser built into it. And so if I wanted to, I could do this and cut the bass and do this. And now it sounds like and it's a little harsh. Yeah. So, but the cool thing is, right, it's got, also, come on, it comes with a red pop filter.
That's worth it.
Yeah. And if you pop these off, that looks just like the SM7B. I mean, almost.
Yeah.
And these are somehow magnetic. They just kind of slip on and off. So now, what's cool is they could make this what I'm playing with is the windscreen.
Yeah.
And so, if you could somehow, if I had a company that would made these in different colors, so like ours would be blue to match the blue and the Ask the Podcast Coach. So,
it's big enough. You could put podcast art on there. Like you could put your show thing on there. It's large enough. For that.
And if I had this right to where this little wing thing here in the middle, I mean, I could put a little sticker right here as well.
Sure.
Yeah. So
plenty of real estate there.
Now the bonus is, now granted, when you listen to these, you go, yeah, there's a little difference. There's a $50 difference in price. Neither of these are USB. They're meant to go into some sort of interface or whatever. But when I saw it was $50 cheaper, and every YouTube video I watched said it's pretty close. The other thing I like is when I use the SM7B windscreen that's this size, the smaller one, not the big giant poofy one I have, I pop this thing. That's why I have the big giant windscreen on the SM7B, because I get pops when I do that. So this one, I was happy that when I was using the smaller windscreen that it doesn't pop. So yeah, it is fun. They're mentioning that when you have the red one on, I refer to windscreens as clown noses, and now we have one that actually looks like a clown nose. So I will
bring it back for Christmas, right? Let's get this Rudolph.
That's it.
It's actually not bad. I mean, from a sound standpoint, for your voice, that mic sounds pretty good, and I think it looks less, because it's trimmed down a little bit. It's not quite this big bulky thing that you get with the SM7B.
Yeah, they have.
Is that the bulk monster?
Yeah, you've got this whole cable coming up here and the whole 9 yards, and it's like, So I'll play with this for the rest of the show here. But it took me. The other thing I didn't realize is I'm using a Samson.
Push it back just a little bit more. It's better. You're better. Yeah, you're better.
Further away.
Hands. Yeah, a little further away. It's a Samson stand, and it's not bad, but this is a OC White, the Podcast Pro stand. This is just so fluid, and where this is like, and again, it's not hard, but it's just a little more like, all right, I got to push it. Okay, there it is. Now it stays where it is once I put it there. But the OC White, now the OC White also is more expensive. In fact, they have some, like you have to take a mortgage out to get a boom arm from OC White in some cases. But the other thing I liked about this versus the SM7B is the fact that this little gizmo just snaps on. It's got little magnets on it. So if I'm worried about having and it's weird because it's blue, but the back of it says Logi for Logitech, because Logitech bought blue. So it's a Logi blue Sona. So, but yeah, so I've answered my question. I'm not sure which one I'm going to use, because this one I'm with you. The big giant muff on the SM7B covers up half my face, and so we'll see. Yeah. I like the look of this one. Can you switch the wind guard back to black to see what that?
You don't like the clown nose?
No, I do like it. I'm just kind of, now that it's one of those kinds of things where you're thinking about, and Mike, we see you in the backstage. We'll get you here in just a second. Yeah, just wondering, I wasn't looking for that when you had it on there, but
all right.
I like that look. Like it kind of did, the microphone for you in this setting from this direction disappears in a lot of ways with the black windscreen on. Kind of just disappears into the set. So it's not like you have a big old mic in front of you. And I think it sounds pretty good too.
Yeah. Coach Dave says something. I actually like my RE320 better than either of these mics. To me, I'm always a big friend of a little more upper end for my S's and T's. And so Coach Dave is saying Daniel J. Lewis has an RE320, which he copied, never needed to change microphones unless I take my show on the road. If I wasn't Dave Jackson from the School of Podcasting, I wouldn't have bought this. Hands down. I wouldn't have bought half these mics, but I had enough people like, hey, what have you heard about this? And I was like, crap. And then the fact that I just discovered this, Sweetwater has a used gear section that I didn't realize. And what I found out is if I wanted to, let's say I'm like, I try this out, I use it for a week, I make my video for YouTube, and I'm like, well, I could stick it in my closet and let it depreciate in value, or you can sell things now on Sweetwater, and they will give you 100% of the money that you sell it for in Sweetwater credit, which is great if you have gear acquisition syndrome, or they'll give you, I think it was like they take 8% if you take your thing in money. So I might do that. I might just start buying gear and then resell it on that. But if I think AppSumo is a scary place, when I went over to the use part of Sweetwater and saw that they had an SM7B for $300, I was like, ooh, and it was in mint condition. So Randy says, Dave sounds harsh to me on the 320. This isn't a 320. This is the blue Sony. Oh, or if he's saying on the other one.
You used your 320.
Yeah,
we used your 320 for a lot of years.
Yeah.
I mean, that was a solid micro. I was a little surprised you moved away from it, to be honest.
And the only reason I did, it went on sale. I never would have bought this. And it was like, oh, it's on sale. I got to buy it. And I was like, okay, now I understand every time. When my ex-wife number one had a serious shoe problem, like serious shoe problem. And I remember many a time I'm asking, okay, how many pairs of shoes do you have? And I'm like, why did you
didn't have a serious
yeah, and she'd go, and how many guitars do you have? Yeah, exactly. So we all have our vices, but her answer many times was, well, they were on sale. So I was that came back to haunt me when I bought that. I was like, oh, I get it now. 20 years later, I finally get it. So
great. I'm tempted. I'm a little tempted to change, and I've used the 2100 for years now. Use it at work, use it at home, and I'm tempted. And then I kind of go, why? It works just fine with what I do and what I have and what I like and what my sound is. And so, I just keep thinking, yeah, it would be nice to have if I wanted to go completely black, like you've got there, I could get the AT 2005.
Yep.
It's been a while since I've said that kind of thing, but I don't know, it works. I like it. So, so I think somebody said in the chat, if it's working, why change it?
Exactly. That is the key.
Hey, can I get a little more coffee? It's been a while.
You can get a little more coffee, and here we go. Much better. And while we're doing that, we might as well say thank you to some people. And by that, I mean the awesome supporters of Ask the Podcast Coach. You can find them over at askthepodcastcoach.com/support. You can join our Patreon. You can buy my book, Profit from Your Podcast. You can throw a few shekels at Jim if you'd like. You can throw shekels at me. It's all there, askthepodcastcoach.com/support. And it's that time. Now, if you haven't done this yet, the woman in the tube from Amazon, you can put her in to be either male or female now, but also you can have her be British. And so if I say, hey, who's open, awesome supporters?
Okay, let me pick from askthepodcastcoach.com/support. It's Felix at LatinPodcastAwards.com.
There we go. So thank you, Felix. Ask the Podcast Coach runs on Podpage. If you would like to try Podpage, well, then go to trypodpage.com and you can play with it for free. It makes building a website for your podcast with no coding super easy. The last time I did one, it took me about 10 minutes. If you need more Jim, and who doesn't, go over and check out Home Gadget Geeks at theaverageguy.tv. And if you're thinking of starting a podcast, or if you have a podcast and you need to grow it, well, when you think podcasting, think School of Podcasting. And if you go to schoolofpodcasting.com/ask, I believe there is a coupon that's automatically put in there. And of course, to become an awesome supporter, so I can buy more microphones, go to askthepodcastcoach.com/support. And actually, one of the reasons how I was able to buy this one is Sweetwater has a 90-day, almost same as cash. I think they charged me like an extra, I don't know, $5-10, but instead of being $350, it's like $100 and something for 3 months. And I was like, I can do that. So there we go. Jim, do you have any kind of, I guess at work you have a team that does all the SEO stuff.
I've got an editor that goes through, and we try to, he'll go back and check previous titles. So, hey, what have we done? What have we said in previous titles? Let's not repeat the same thing over and over again. He's been editing for a lot of years, so he kind of knows what works and what doesn't. No, I need to, this is one of those things, those rabbit holes I'm afraid I'd get into, is if I started thinking okay, I'm going to start writing some show notes in a tool. It's going to tell me what I should do and what I shouldn't do. And then I'm going to spend an hour optimizing it. And then I'm going to, I'm not saying I shouldn't do it. I probably should. I just haven't prioritized it from a time perspective yet. So no, I don't have any tools that I use. I mean, I have a HTML editor tool that I drop it into. So for WordPress, we got in a question earlier, Dave, in the chat, by the way, somebody asking if they should be using PowerPress for WordPress in doing their, because PowerPress is one of those things that adds a bunch of tools to your show notes, right?
Yeah, you can put timestamps in your description there on your website. And as Jim was talking about, you can click on the timestamp and it will jump right to the that time in the episode. And you don't have to use Blueberry to use PowerPress. I have it on my site. The reason I never took it off is by the time other tools came available, I had like 300 episodes, and I'm not replacing 300 players on my website. But it's got that tool. You can actually use it for your feed. So if you want, for a while, I mean, in the early days of podcasting, before there were media hosts, people would upload their file to their web host, which I do not recommend, but then they would put that link to the MP3 file in PowerPress. PowerPress would make your feed, and it did all the fun Apple stuff that you need. And so it's a great tool. My only worry about that is, oh man, it's been probably 10 years now. I had a thing on my website. I was using PowerPress for my feed, even though I was using Libsyn, and I just had, I don't know if it was a Russian hacker or what, but it was denial of service kind of thing. And one of the things, I'm working with HostGator at the time was where I was doing that. And they're like, hey, can you go in to the back end of my website and see what's taking up the most traffic? And it's hard to believe, but it was my RSS feed, because an RSS feed is nothing but a text file, but it was just through the roof. And they're like, if there's any way you can, get that off. And so I redirected. Luckily, I had always made episodes in Libsyn and just copied and pasted the MP3 file into PowerPress. And so I redirected my feed to look at the Libsyn feed, and that got that off there. So that's always my worry, is it's another thing that might slow down your website. Now, in reality, is it going to? Probably not. And if you're using WordPress and PowerPress, it doesn't matter if you're using PowerPress or not. If you're using WordPress, have a backup, at least one, and go there, right? So there you go. So yeah, it's a great plugin. That's the other one. It's been around forever. It's solid. But if you're using,
supported well.
Yeah,
they support it really well.
Yeah. So it's got that. You can do category feeds, all sorts of, it's kind of a Swiss Army knife of podcasting. It just is it only good for WordPress? Yeah. I recommend. I mean, for me, the thing I liked about PowerPress is I controlled it, and that's where Todd, control. It's under my domain. It's my feed. Got it. But I don't worry about anybody that I'm putting a podcast on. I don't worry about them going out of business. Like if I had a great example is I helped somebody this week, and they were moving to Kajabi, and I was like, don't move to Kajabi. And the reason for that is they don't offer a change of address. If you go to Kajabi, you're going to have a hard time leaving. And it dawned on me that Blueberry also has this thing called Podcast Mirror. And so if you're a person that's like, nope, I'm moving to Kajabi, put your feed, the Kajabi feed, in Podcast Mirror. And then let's say I was on Libsyn. I would redirect my Libsyn feed, not to Kajabi because I can't leave. I redirect it to Podcast Mirror, which looks at Kajabi. And that way, it's basically Podcast Mirror is FeedBurner, because we all thought FeedBurner was going away. Who knew they were going to revamp it? But nonetheless, it just gives you a way, if you're going to use Kajabi, that later when you go, man, this Kajabi podcasting thing blows, you can leave. Because otherwise, how you get out of that is you have to make an episode just for Kajabi that says, if you're listening to this episode, you're missing all the new content. Please unsubscribe, go to my website, blah-blah-blah.com/subscribe, and resubscribe to the show to continue this conversation over there. And that will only be on Kajabi. And then you go into all the other apps, and update Apple and Google and Spotify and Stitcher and everybody else. You have to say, hey, which is the joy of the 301 redirect. It's a change of address, and Kajabi doesn't do that. So, but there are a couple other ones. There's, I know Castos is a media host, and they have seriously simple podcasting. There's another plugin. I'm just not a big fan. The other thing with plugins, I think anybody that's using WordPress has experienced the white screen of death. Mm-hmm. And I don't want my podcast anywhere near a thing that on a regular basis gives me the white screen of death. So,
well, and there's sometimes conflicts in that. I think, Christian just upgraded the whole infrastructure at Maple Grove to PHP 8. And that's, WordPress is kind of based on this. Is a little nerdy again, but PHP's got a lot of stuff tied into that. I don't know how or what, but and one of the plugins broke. And so I was like, and it's one of the plugins I'd stopped paying for. So he was like, hey, can you upgrade that? And it was like $30. So I just upgraded it. Worked just great. So there is, anytime you go down this route of hosting it yourself or like PowerPress, I have this saying that options equal confusion. And in PowerPress, there are a ton of options, Dave. You can do whatever you want, which is awesome until you don't know what you need or what you want.
Right.
You can mess things up pretty fast that way. So just a warning on this, yes, you get a lot of ability to do a lot of great things, but it's as an example, deciding which kind of player that I want to use sometimes in PowerPress, right? There's a couple different options. I can use my own, embed some other stuff, just figure it where it goes on the page, some of those kinds of things. That's all awesome unless you don't know how to figure it out. And so it can be a little overwhelming for someone. Just listen, PowerPress plugin is not something you would set up in 15 minutes and have running. There's some things to figure out in it for sure. It
takes a little getting used to. I don't know if they released it. I think it came out yesterday, but Road X is coming. So if somebody in the chat room wants to look up Road X, they had a video that was completely useless. It was like, it's coming. Road X is coming. And I was like, okay. And Road X is what again exactly? So I think it came out yesterday was the 14th. The other thing we wanted to mention is 8% of me is celebrated Native American Day. And Apple, if you are of Native American ascent, then Apple is looking to share stories. Why this is on LinkedIn, I thought it was weird, but who knew this is where it came up. But Becky from Apple Podcast, and here's the thing. I thought October was Hispanic something month, which was weird because it started in the middle of the month. And I was like, wait a minute, doesn't the first half of October count as, our awesome supporter today is Felix from the Latin Podcast Awards. I'm like, wait, do you not get the whole month of October? And then this from Apple is saying that Native American Heritage Month, and maybe it's in November. Let me see this real quick. Nope, it's kind of pointing it out, but they're looking for Native American stories. So if you are of a Native American descent, who knows? You might get a little plug there from Apple. You never know. That's coming on. And then I got this question from Facebook. It says, so we've been using Zoom to do our podcast remote interviews. Jim, what do you use for interviews? Are you still using Skype?
Oh no, everything's on Streamyard.
Streamyard, okay.
Yeah,
well, good, because you can help with this then. So we've been using Zoom to do our podcast remote interviews, but wanted to switch over to Streamyard as that is going to work better for our needs. With our guest scheduling, we use Calendly and have an integration with Zoom, so they would receive a link that would be accessible on the day of the recording. Is there a way to integrate or schedule a recording only or live stream when booking guests for StreamYard? So the whole point is with Calendly, they can say, oh, I want to, be on Jim's show on November 7th, and it automatically sends them a Calendly link. What do you do with StreamYard?
Not that I heard of, not a StreamYard integration with that. I'm not saying it doesn't exist, but I haven't heard of one yet. That'd be kind of cool with the service, because those services just integrate with your Zoom account. When you set up the account, it automatically generates a Zoom link and sends it over so you can do it. We just do that manually. So we use, I set things up. We use the Gallup Outlook calendar, and I have a special account just for the podcasts. Send that over to them. Sometimes, more and more people are getting these, hey, you can come book my time here. And sometimes I send them the request because, you go back and forth on, hey, are you open here? Are you open there? Right. Can you do it this way? Can you do it that way? I just prefer it takes an email or two, like, hey, what works for you? Okay, let's get this done. Boom. I'll send them an invite. Then the week before I go into StreamYard, do the coming week's podcasts. Usually I think we're doing 3 a week at this point. So I go in, generate those, create those episodes in Streamyard. That makes them available on YouTube. Grab the Streamyard link, put it in the invite, and send it to them. Yeah, it's a little bit of manual work, but I actually prefer it to automatic because it makes me do it. It makes me think about, okay, here's the coming week and here's what's coming up, and some of the Dave, there's been plenty of times that on Friday afternoon I've looked and I'm like, oh crap, that's first thing Monday. You're like, ooh, did we do a pre-call? Have I worked through this? So the automatic processes are nice. This guy needs to kind of be in it from a manual standpoint, just to realize, hey, some things are coming up that I need to be aware of. So that's what we do.
What I've done is I use Acuity scheduling, which is now Squarespace scheduling. They bought Acuity, and you can set up different types. Like I have, if you hire me for a strategy session, I'm going to ask you a bunch of questions on that. If you are a member of the School of Podcasting and you need a couple questions answered, that's a different type of meeting. So I have different questions. I really like that system. And so what I did was, it also gives you the ability to send an email like, hey, thanks so much for scheduling this and that. And I just put in it, hey, now if it's a School of Podcasting member, it integrates with Zoom. So I use Zoom for that. But for my people, like if it's a podcast interview, well, I'm going to be using Squadcast for that. And so I say, I will be sending you shortly a link to our conversation in Squadcast. And then that's where I start on the day of the interview, please use Chrome, please be in a quiet room with the best microphone available, blah, blah, blah. And then the other thing, even though it puts it on their calendar, I still, on the day of the interview, I will email them in the morning and go, looking forward to our conversation, this evening or whenever. Just want to make sure life hasn't happened. Are we still good for whatever the time is? And ever since I've started doing that, I don't have people do no-shows, because I've had people go, oh, I'm so glad you did this. Grandma died again. I can't make it tonight. But when I just say, there's a calendar thing, it'll remind them. I'm like, and it's best to know that in the morning, not a half hour before when you turn down, family time. No, I got an interview tonight. And then you're sitting there on your computer and nobody's going to show up. And, but it's, so that's how I handle it. Calendly does integrate with Zoom. I didn't think about this. You might try Zapier. So I was so bummed. Calendly used to have an affiliate program, and for whatever reason, they quit it. Probably because they didn't need it, because everybody and their brother, when people go, what should I use for scheduling? Everybody just says Calendly, because there's a free version and then a paid version. So I guess if you don't need that extra bonus, you don't need that. So she says, how many of you, DR says, how many are you allowed for that acuity feature? Well, usually my interviews are just one person, but it does do a ton of stuff. Like if I want to sell classes with a limited number of seats, I can do that in Acuity. You can have, at least for me, I can have unlimited types of meetings. So I have one that's, if somebody says, hey, would you like to be on my show? If they haven't sent me a calendar link, I will send them a link, and that's just called Be on Your Show. So they then schedule time on my calendar, but that's totally different. It's like, who is your audience? What are you looking like? Why do you want me as a guest? That whole thing. So, but no, the reminder part, I am doing that manually. I basically, because I will look up on my calendar. I'm like, oh, I have an interview with Jim today. And even though, Calendly, Acuity, there's one on AppSumo that's got a lifetime deal. They have a really super simple calendar tool. I still do it manually. Just number one, because it doesn't look automated. And then number two, I've just had people, I don't know why they don't reply to the automated one that says, just a reminder, you've got a thing with Dave at 2:00 today. So, but DR says TidyCal is a one-time thing in AppSumo. So adding again to the link list, which is fine, because there's an affiliate program for TidyCal. So, and if you're looking for just simple scheduling, that's a great tool. So there are times when I've thought of canceling my Acuity and going to that. So I see in the green room, we have the one and only Coach Dave. So look at your background. Holy cow. He's on
Good
Mars,
morning, guys.
man. How cool is that?
I didn't do my hair this morning. You caught me off guard. Thanks for having me back out on the show. I think this is my 2022 appearance.
That's
I think I
it.
had one in 2021. Yeah.
Excellent. So tell me about this textmetrics thing.
Yeah. I want to, I'll tell you about textmetrics, and maybe I can share my screen and show you, take you a walk through it. But somebody mentioned TidyCal.
Yeah.
I use that myself, or I did use that myself. And the one limitation with it, and they know it's a bug, if you set up an appointment in TidyCal, everything works fine. I've got my TidyCal, connected to my Zoom, so it automatically sets that all up and everything.
Right.
But if you set up an appointment in like your Outlook directly, it won't then go back and update TidyCal. So there's a disconnect. They said it takes like 24 hours or something, and for most of us, I think that's too long.
Yeah.
Just a minor bug in that one, but it's only like $19 or $29 or something. So.
It's ridiculously cheap for a lifetime, whatever you call it, subscription to that. So yeah. Well, thanks for that. I didn't realize that.
All right. So let's get into textmetrics.
Now, is this a WordPress thing? It looks very WordPressy.
It does feel WordPressy, but it's not. It's a standalone app. It's right at textmetrics.
Okay.
It has projects and it has pages. And what I'm going to take you into is just kind of show you what a page looks like.
Okay.
There's a bunch of different ways to do it. Like if I wanted to do ask the podcast coach.com, right? That's you.
Yeah.
I can actually import that page.
Interesting.
Directly. Go ahead.
This looks a lot like Surfer SEO. In fact, they all eventually kind of look like each other, but this is interesting. Because I can see where on the screen we're seeing, I can see where it's been grading different pages and such. Hey, this is Future Dave jumping in here because this was kind of a visual thing. And as an audio listener, I appreciate you listening. And so I am cutting out the part. If you want to see it, the video is out at askthepodcastcoach.com/411. It turns out that you can't buy this. You can buy it. You just have to call them to get a price. And I really, really hate it when companies do that. But thanks to Coach Dave for giving us a peek. Well, thank you for answering.
Thanks for having me. If I can help out, yeah, happy to pop in. And everybody in the chat room.
Well, before you leave, what is your website?
It's the soccersidelines.com, and that show has fizzled. Like I haven't really published anything since COVID kicked in, and that's really because youth soccer and the entire youth sports industry was decimated by COVID and taking everybody off the field, and it really torpedoed us. But I do have my business is at tworld.com, and you can find us out there. We buy and sell. We help people buy and sell businesses and franchises and things like
cool.
that. So that's how I actually make money.
There we go. Awesome. Well, thanks Coach Dave. We'll see
All right.
you.
Bye-bye.
Yeah, take care.
Interesting stuff. And I can see where, like you were talking, like you can really, I like the way he does that. It's like he puts in his stuff, and then basically he's using that almost like a low hanging fruit. Like here's some stuff you might have missed, and he adds that, but you could totally just get lost in this. I know I have one of my clients has, I think it's Yoast SEO plugin, and she obsesses over, it's only up to 87%. I need to add more. And I'm like, okay. Cause in the end, Neil Headley says this because Neil's a copywriter, has a copywriting course. And, he said, you can write for the machines and the algorithms. He goes, but an algorithm has never pushed buy now ever. He goes, that's done by a human. He goes, you might be able to attract people to your website. He goes, but in the end, a human is going to make the decision to buy. And I was like, that's a really good point. So that's, it's one of those things too, that it just, for me, I always try to write for people when I, write my show notes or my blog posts or whatever. And, that's always been, and if you talk to, I have a friend of mine, Marcus Couch, who's much more versed in SEO and tools. And, I've heard Todd say this, Todd Cochran, that, in the end, write for people. Like if you don't have time to do SEO, just write for people and write something good. That's where a lot of these Word Hero and all these, Jasper, we talked about that a couple of weeks ago, where, it's, you can get lost in those things writing for a robot. So Craig says, isn't this really just Yoast for WordPress? Yeah. That's why I'm kind of saying, now that I've seen textmetrics and I've seen whatever the heck I mentioned, Neurowriter, and I've seen Surfer SEO, they all kind of do the same thing. So, and even the one I mentioned earlier, Longtailrpo, that's more of a keyword tool, but they all kind of do the same thing. And I watched a video yesterday that said there is no tool, because some of these, like you type in a keyword and it'll be like, oh, here are the top keywords in your genre. And they're like, yeah, like that might be slightly true, but they're kind of saying the internet is so huge that you can't really say this is the definitive top keywords, because you would have to have this ginormous database. And I was like, I've never heard that statement before, where they're like, because I was looking up Longtailrpo, and they're like, look, it's not a bad tool, but it's not as, and they were saying that they did, I forget what it was, some phrase, and Longtailrpo was like, nobody's searching for that. But they wrote the blog post for people because they knew their community. They knew a lot of people were looking for this. They put it out, made it the keyword, and presto, they got tons of traffic. They're like, so, they're like, these things are not gospel. They're like, you can use them like Dave is doing. Use it to massage and give you an insight, maybe something you missed. But they're, the whole like, use this tool and get to the top page of Google. I'm like, not really sure about.
Yeah, you could though. You could.
Yeah.
I mean, there's some good advice there.
You definitely have a better shot. Like Coach Dave said, his SEO has gone up. So if you were,
I think you want to use it in a way where you use it to improve your own writing. It's the same thing with Jasper, right? Use it to improve your own writing. Don't use it to write. You're at the end of the day, it really should. This is my opinion. The views, the views and expressed in this statement is my opinion. I think oftentimes I see this in a lot of the Jasper user groups. Is like, hey, I want Jasper to write a book for me. What 3 words do I need to use for it to do that? And you kind of go, not sure that's the real intent of that, in the sense of like, use these to improve your process. My opinion, again, not don't try to bow to them and let them, because they don't know. They don't know what you're trying to do.
I've been watching more stuff on YouTube, and it's amazing watching content creators explain how to grow their YouTube channel. I was so amazed, Jim, that number one, come up with a genre that you're trying to, communicate with, write good titles for your videos, and then, try to help people and bring value. I was like, I've never heard this before. Bring value and know who you're talking to. Yeah. I was like, it's, granted there are things, that you can do. And I see things on YouTube that people are doing, but in the end, it kind of boils down to just bring value and then make sure to try to tell other people about it. Craig says, I'm currently doing a YouTube course that teaches to choose keywords and titles before creating the content. I wonder if it's the same for podcasts. Maybe. I know Tim Schmoyer over at Video Creators, he did a thing on keywords and was saying that they're important, but they're not. He thinks people are putting too much emphasis on it. So I think this is one of those cases, like Jim was saying, I think it's going to be different for everybody, and it depends on the tool. But I think in the end, if you kind of just focus on people, it might help you. I remember when I started the Logical Weight Loss podcast, I looked up weight loss. I looked up like diet and healthy and all these other keywords. And all I did was went to Google and like, how many searches for weight loss? How many searches for losing weight? How many searches for diet? And I just made a little spreadsheet, and the one that got the most searches was weight loss. And I was like, all right, it's the Logical Weight Loss podcast. It is. So, that's how I use it sometimes. So,
why do you use the word logical?
Because it's me. And so it was very much, as opposed to, which is funny because so much of weight loss is not logical. It's all mental. You know, I feel, and it's a circle. If I feel like crap because I didn't get that deal I thought I was going to get and nobody loves me, I'm going to go eat worms. So how do you solve that? You go to the fridge and you eat some ice cream, and then you step on the scale and the scale goes up, and that makes you feel bad, which makes you go to the fridge, which makes it's this circle thing. So my whole thing was eat less, exercise more. You know, that's very logical kind of thing. So that just tied into me, and it just seemed to, where everybody else was doing the keto and the grapefruit and the popcorn and the, apple cider, it was like, this is just, let's look at all these things. And in the end, it's funny. I quit that show. I basically told my audience, I will do this podcast now on a, when I feel like it basis. And I canceled my Patreon and everything else. I just got bored with it. And then I got a sponsor and I was like, oh, now I got to do the show. And I really, they were very persistent because I'm like, nah, the show's kind of dead. And they're like, well, if we do this and that, I was like, okay, I can do 10 more episodes. So, it is what it is. Jason says, going back to SEO, he deleted all the Yoast stuff off my sites. It was causing incessant logging, log out issues. Well, that goes back to why I don't, again, PowerPress is a great plugin. It's not PowerPress. It's all the other plugins and the shenanigans that happen on WordPress, which is why I don't use it except for a few of my websites. I just don't, I love it, but I can say I use Managed WP as a backup. I think I have a backup on my web host. And then I think I have a plugin that backups to Dropbox or something like that. I've just had way too many times when everything's fine and, oh, great, Thanksgiving is next week, and you go to your website and you're like, what? And it's just a white screen of nothing. And you're like, damn you, WordPress.
It's always the holiday.
Oh, yeah.
It's always the holiday.
Yeah. Oh, day after Friday, I'm taking the day off, long weekend. Here we go. White screen of death. And you're like, it's like, drives me nuts. So. But I'll tell you what, we'll go ahead and start wrapping things up here. Jim, what's coming up on theaverageguy.tv?
Yeah, Edward Weniger joins us. He's the president of Alpha Bitcoin here in Omaha. We had a kind of a show where we talk a little bit about where's cryptocurrency today. And, it's real popular for a while. It's kind of been waning some as the price has been down. So Edward's joined us. We have a great conversation. It's actually just a short, tight hour. So if you want to join us, I'll be posting it a little bit later today, homegadgetgeeks.com.
And on the School of Podcasting, as you heard me say, I'm looking at a couple things, one of which is what's the difference between a conversation and a podcast. I'm going to pull that out of my head.
Don't use my quote. It was terrible.
And we'll be talking a little bit, a lot of the stuff we did today. I'll kind of, again, summarize my thoughts on this microphone. And a couple other things we got coming up on the School of Podcasting. Want to say thanks to Mark over at podcastbranding.co and Dan over on basedonatruestorypodcast.com. Thanks to the 20 people that are still hanging out here in the chat room. And thanks to everyone at Wisdom, 59 people on Wisdom. And again, if you wanted to ask a question on Wisdom, you could have clicked on the plus sign. But hey, if you're listening to this and you're like, oh, I can never make it live, go out to askthepodcastcoach.com. There's a little microphone in the bottom right-hand corner. You can leave a message there, and we'll play it on the show and answer it on the next show. And plus, I'll also probably answer the question before next Saturday, just so you don't have to wait. But thanks for everybody for showing up. Enjoy the fall. This weekend in Ohio is the week. If you want to go look at the trees, do it this weekend because the snow is coming. So thanks so much. We'll see you next week with another episode of Ask the Podcast Coach. And until then, happy podcasting.